that our chairman, Sajid Sayyid, has returned after 2 months. Alhamdulillah, the masjid is doing okay. It didn't burn down or anything. So we survived, and I hope he's mashallah, happy to see that we've been able to make it, but we're also very happy to have him back. So inshallah, please give him your salams, inshallah ta'ala. And also nice to see everyone, mashallah. Even so many of our community chairs are in the house here tonight, mashallah. And Dr. Rashmi is also here with us tonight, mashallah. And mashallah. Huh? Susan. Susan from Women's Space is also here with us tonight. Everyone give her a round of applause, mashallah. Hello, Susan. MashaAllah. All right, so without further ado, let us get started, inshallah ta'ala.
Did you want to go first? I'll let Rahila.
You wanted to go first?
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more, so go ahead. Go ahead. Ladies first.
Oh, you want me to start? Okay. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Obviously, we begin with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I really don't want to say too much. I really want to highlight what they're going to say, but I just wanted to set the stage a little bit for the blessed month of Ramadan, which is not too far away. I think to be exact, 20 days out. So 20 days out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will flip our lives, right, from a life that is lived outwardly to a life that is lived inwardly, right? Where we slow down on everything that's happening outside of us and we take a moment to look inside of ourselves. And what does that mean and what does that look like? And I'm reminded of Aisha radiallahu anha when she said her moment of transformation, her moment of inspiration as a child was when she would watch her father, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, crying to the point where he could not stop crying when he was reading the Quran, right? That when we think about this idea, before we have Ihsan and Rahila speak, but this idea that the Sahaba were deeply emotional people, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was as well. So the fact that Aisha radiallahu anha, our greatest female scholar in the Islamic tradition, and the most authoritative scholar after the death of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the fact that she's saying the tears of her father made her the person who she was is a very indicative reality for all of us. That when we have emotionally attuned and emotionally intelligent men, it makes the lives of the women around us that much more fulfilled. And when we have emotionally negligent men who are not present, who make the people around them feel abandoned, feel lonely, right? Then it's as if we're bringing hell on earth. And so part of the wisdom of Ramadan is that it allows us to shut down our surroundings so that we can get to know that part of us that we rarely get to see. And the truth of the matter is that often that process never occurs because we're not able to empty ourselves. And so Ramadan begins, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, شَهْرُ رَمَضَانَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ فِيهِ الْقُرْآنِ, right? That Ramadan is the month in which the Quran came down. And so whoever lives to see this month, let them fast. As in, how do we find that emotional space where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for instance, says, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, right? ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُم. He says, like, their hearts are trembling. Their skin, right? The hair on their skin is goosebumps. Like they're so emotionally and internally alive that their internal state manifests in a physiological state, on their skin, on their hearts, in their eyes. And how do we do that? Well, it starts with fasting. It starts with emptying the body so that the heart can start to feel what it's like again, right? To be content with this internal life. And when you're not eating and when you're not moving too much and you feel the stillness and you feel the silence and you feel the emptiness, that's when you put your head on the ground and you say, wow, this feels amazing. This is actually the best I've felt in a long time. And then you get to remember that the sweetness of your internal life is far greater than anything you can accumulate of the material world. And so that's where I want to start this discussion, that controlling the hand and controlling the tongue and making the people around us feel safe and feel fulfilled starts with us stopping and becoming tuned to our emotional inner states. Now for the topic that I actually gave, which was balancing life in Ramadan, right, is of course something that we all know to be true of Islam. That the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that nobody, right, attempts to overburden themselves, to like really push themselves in religion, illa ghalabatu, except that the religion will exhaust them. As in to say, ascending the ladder to God is not through exhaustion, right? It's actually through a sincere approach to the self and one that gradually seeks, right, to cause change within. Right? And as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, that the best is a little, right, if it's consistent. So consistency in little amounts is always better than exhausting yourself and then having nothing to show for. And that's exactly what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is trying to iterate to us when he says, for instance, some people stand the whole night in prayer and all they get from that is sleepiness, right? That's all they get. They get tired. They didn't get anything from staying up all night. And he said some people fast all day and all they get is hungry. They didn't accomplish anything spiritually. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is very clear that there are spiritual realities that we're seeking to accomplish through fasting, through prayer, through reading Quran, right? Through moments of silence. But if one makes the end, right, makes the goal those things, then they're gonna lose the plot. They're not actually gonna get what they want from those acts of worship and from those devotions. And so for Ramadan, it's very clear that that balance starts with a recognition that one of the most fulfilling and rewarding things you will do in Ramadan is spending time with your family, being present with your family, making sure they're fulfilled emotionally, making sure they're fulfilled physically, right, spiritually. That is one of the greatest things you can do in Ramadan. And not to mention eating with them, being present with them, right? Just as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لِلصَّائِمِ فَرْحَتَانِ. He said, for the person who breaks their fast, they get two forms of happiness. One, when they break their fast, as in they've been eating, that they've been fasting all day, now they finally get to eat. So that first bite is sacred, it's spiritual. And then he said, and the other one, right, is when they meet Allah. Now, we tend to think about this idea of meeting Allah as in when they meet Allah on the Day of Judgment. But also, when you have that moment of sincerity, when you've broken your fast and you're able to look inside and say, Allah, I tried to do this for you, right? I don't know if it's perfect. I don't know even if I have everything together, if I made some mistakes in it, but I know that I tried to do something for you. And that moment where you're able to reflect on that, that is a moment of joy, that moment of sincere accomplishment and fulfillment. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from us. The last thing I will mention is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's beautiful statement, in which he, in a good hadith, really it's a remarkable statement, where he said, "At-ta'im ash-shakir bimanzilihi 'inda Allah." He said, the one who eats with gratitude in their place with Allah, in the eyes of Allah, has the same station, has the same place as the one who fasts patiently. So the one who eats with gratitude is the same to Allah as the one who fasts with patience, right? So what does that mean, right? Is that Ramadan is not just important for fasting, but when you eat with gratitude during Ramadan, it's just like fasting, right? And so balance is that you're also bringing the same emotions that you bring to fasting, you're also bringing them to eating. Bringing that gratitude, bringing that presence, right? That Allah is giving us this tool of fasting so that we can come to that beautiful station of gratitude. And that includes gratitude for each other, right? And that's really one of the worst feelings in the world, is when you cook something or you do something for someone, right? And you feel a sense of rejection. Right? You cook something for someone and they say, where's the salt? Where's the this? Where's the that? How come you didn't serve it this way, or serve it like my mom did it, or serve it like, right? That is the worst form of abandonment, of neglect, of rejection, right? So validating each other through gratitude is the essence of fasting. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our internal states beautiful, to beautify our homes, our families, our relationships, and to fill our relationships with humility, with gratitude, and with presence. May we be present with one another. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. And all praise is due to our loving Creator. And here is Rahila.
Thank you, Mom. It was beautiful words that you said. I'm going to actually kick off what he actually said about family. What keeps family together is the unity and how they speak to each other. And that's the subject I'll be talking about, how people talk to each other. And I'm actually going to say a slogan that actually stayed with me for the rest of my life. There's a saying, the tongue has no bones, but it's strong enough to break a heart. So be careful with your words. So that is a very powerful statement. As I remember growing up, my father always kept his word. He always talked with us with polite and very sincerity. He had very great, he kept his word with honors, and he spoke with my mother with respect. And he spoke with us. There's 3 girls in my house, and he spoke with great dignity. So how do we keep that? How do we keep verbal, communication going? And I've seen a lot of cases where there's verbal abuse happening with each other. And that's the, where we have to working on the verbal, how do we communicate with each other with respect. Because actually, if you see it, when you talk to people, you cannot see the pain. You cannot see the damage has been done. Those are the hardest thing to prove and saying, he hurt me, he said this to me. This is the stuff that I cannot deal with. There's no trail of damage, and it takes longer to heal. And that is a sad part. We have to talk to each other with respect. And verbal abuse can have a long-lasting damage. It's when people talk to them and yelling at them, they criticize, they abuse to them, they put them down. That's when it affects the person's self-esteem. It causes a lot of damage. People get depressed, and it affects the relationship. It breaks the house of what's happening inside. I remember growing up, every relationship my dad had with everybody, it was always beautiful. And he had an honor, and everybody's like, your dad he was true with his words. And that's where we have to learn how to keep the relationship going. How do we keep our words to each other? How do we talk to people? That makes a difference. And I'm actually going to put the Imam on the spot. The way he speaks is actually great. And that is the way we should be talking to people. Sorry, I had to put you on the spot.
I caught it on camera.
See? I'm not going to say anything now.
I'm gonna send it to my wife.
But that, at the end of the day, is how we talk to each other. I would say about early years of my career, I remember my boss had said something to me, and it still stays with me. He says to me, it's not what you say, it's how do you say it. And I always take that. It's like, how do you talk to people the way you want to be talked? Talk to with respect. And that's where we have to learn, whether it's with husband and wife, whether it's with your children, whether it's your co-workers, whether it's your friends. How do you want to talk to them is the way you want to be talked to. We do have to be very careful and mindful with words and how we want to talk. And that makes a difference. We tend to take it for granted how we talk to people. Verbal abuse is on the rise, and it's the hardest thing to prove to people. So, what do we do? What can we do to make that change? If you're in a situation where verbal abuse is happening, I would suggest is you tell the person, say, I need you to stop. Stop abusing me and stop saying, I cannot take this. But if you're in a situation where domestic violence is happening and you're fearful and you cannot do that, that's when you want to create a safety plan and say, I have to find a way to get out of the situation without hurting my life, how it's going to affect my life. That's when you create a safety plan, create a resources, and say, I'm going to put my feet down and find ways to get out of the situation. And if you feel unsafe and unable to set boundaries, reach out to a trained professional that can help you find a way to get out. We do have a son who's an attorney, and he will speak on the legal point, how to get that. To get help. I'm a trained mental health professional. we actually work on how to find ways to help you get out of this situation. We do have a lot of medical doctors sitting here. We have organizations that does help you to find ways to get out. Verbal abuse is not the only form of abuse that happens. It's emotional abuse, there's financial abuse, there's mental abuse. And unfortunately, these type of abuse, you cannot prove it. It's hard to show. And it's your word against his word. So it can do a lot of damage when you hear you're horrible, you're ugly, you're the worst person in the world, you don't deserve to live. These are damaging. It affects you as a person. That's where, as a trained professional, we use a lot of CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. And you have to tell yourself, I'm the best person in the world. I deserve better. And you have to work on getting out of this situation, telling yourself, I don't deserve this at all. So there's ways to work on it, and if you need help, there's help out there. I have domestic violence hotline number that can be shared. I have a whole lot of resources that you can actually reach out to. You're not alone. No one deserves to be alone and suffer in silence. This is not your battle, it's everybody's battle. And every person that suffers alone, remember the next generation, it becomes an intergenerational trauma. It continues. So it has to be broken, the cycle has to be broken. It's not your fight, it's everybody's fight. And I think Ehsan's going to talk about the legal point. Thank you.
Thank you, Rila. Okay. Here you are, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good evening. I want to thank Imam, Safwan, Rahila, and the board here to give me an opportunity to speak with you all on a Friday evening, taking time out of your busy schedules on a very important topic. My name is Ehsan F. Chaudhry. I'm an attorney, and I'm glad last time I was here in your beautiful masjid was on Saturday, July 2nd, 2021 for my son's Amin. I'm all the way in Toms River, and I was very glad to come here because you have a beautiful masjid, so I want to say that, and we had a wonderful event. I see a lot of familiar pioneers and faces here. I see Uncle Sohail and Auntie Nasheen, two of my colleagues here on the attorney side, Nadia Bandukta and Simi, Brother Hassan. So it's very welcoming when you come to a place late night and you see familiar people. Everybody should have on their desks at least a few copies of the 4th edition of the Domestic Violence Handbook. This is from the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, which I was a trustee of and the chair of the diversity committee. If you don't, I would just ask one of the brothers or sisters to pass it out to anybody who doesn't have it, along with my card. So with that being said, I just want to give a little introduction about myself as to who is this person and why should we listen to him about this topic. Most recently, I was just at the ISCJ Masjid last Sunday, and I did a presentation for the elder community, and it went very well. It was probably the most captivated group I had. They were very educated, they're very knowledgeable, very sincere in their questions. I can tell you that I've been going around the state presenting this for various reasons, but the most important one is that during the pandemic, my practice in the domestic violence area in the Arab, South Asian, and Muslim community probably increased by 200%. So for anybody here who's an accountant or a physician or a plumber, whatever vocation you're a part of, you see the day-to-day of what happens where the outside doesn't truly appreciate and understand that. Same thing from my perspective, that it became so problematic that I felt I had to go around and do this. To what Rahila said and what the Imam touched upon is that it is intergenerational and it's a cycle. So what's a wheel on a cycle? It just keeps going round and round and round without any exit. And that's what I'm here to talk about a little bit. It's a topic that could take all week, but I'm just gonna briefly touch upon a few things. My background, I'm a criminal defense attorney. My wife is a lawyer for the Division on Civil Rights. She couldn't make it here tonight. I'm the past president of the New Jersey Muslim Lawyers Association for almost 4 years. I'm the only Muslim South Asian board certified as a criminal trial attorney. I'm a former assistant prosecutor and law enforcement officer. I'm a graduate of the State Police Citizens Academy and the FBI Citizens Academy. I've handled everything from murder to speeding tickets, and I'm very honored to be here before you. I happened to do some few political things. I was picked as the first Muslim to lead up a chair for the governor on law and justice under Governor Murphy. And all these experiences have culminated in information that I could supplant to you. Obviously, the imam is the expert here, but as I've said in a few of these lectures, the word ilm appears in the Quran over 750 times. And my point here is to bring some knowledge with the American court system, take the benefit of that and take the benefit of our religion and put it together for a positive result. Because we are talking about the family, and again, deferring to the imam, it's said in Islam that once you're married, half your faith is perfected. But what happens when that other half goes down? So that's what I'm going to talk about. Feel free at any time to cut me off or ask a question. So what I want you to understand here is just from a legal perspective. In New Jersey, we have 21 counties, and each one of those 21 counties has a superior court. So here we're in Mercer County, and our superior court for restraining order matters and domestic violence matters will be in Trenton at the Mercer County Superior Court. What's interesting about domestic violence situation and why it applies to us is because there's certain old customs that are being corrupted in a way that our people, whether they're immigrants or not, will use the positivity of Islam and they will manipulate it in a wrong way, whether you're from Egypt or Palestinian or Jordanian, Indian, Pakistani. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to show a clip, and for those of you that are old enough, you will realize that there was a movie called Not Without My Daughter, and maybe many of you remember it. This was at the height of when the United States had a lot of animosity towards Iran, and one of the things that Hollywood did was to kind of label the angry Muslim man as a domestic abuser. And that sentiment has carried to this day. This is a movie, I believe, from 1984. I was 7 years old when it came out, but I just want to show a clip for those of you who haven't seen it to understand what's going on. I mean, I do see some little kids here, so now I'm debating whether or not to show it, but let me just hold that thought and go to the presentation.
You have my permission to do what you need to do.
Okay, I have the imam's permission, so he gave me the clearance, so.
I don't know what we're gonna see.
No, I'll skip past
I'll
it, don't
trust
worry.
your judgment. I think exposure is good. That's
Parents are being warned.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to show the slide. That's okay. Thank you. So we'll hold up.
Are you nervous?
Okay, so what I want to start off with here, and again, deferring to the imam, this is what I was talking about, where people in our religion improperly use things to justify their own bad behavior, namely domestic violence. And I'm just going to move to the side here. So you can all read this clearly. This is from Surah An-Nisa, the womankind, chapter 4, ayah 34. This is Yusuf Abdullah Ali's translation. And the main point I want to get on, and this is good too because I see a good mix of ages, men and women, sisters, youngers. So the point is when they're talking about women, you could read this, but here's the point I want to get to. Refuse to share their beds, and last, beat them lightly. And many of you have read this. I mean, all of you have probably read this. But that's one thing I could tell you as a practitioner, which I have been seeing in my practice from people who are overseas will use or espouse that type of mentality to justify their bad behavior. Now, again, people have to understand, we're not in Jordan, we're not in Yemen, we're not in Bangladesh, we're not in Pakistan. This is a problem. And I'm going to tell you why it causes a great deal of rift for people. I've handled these cases for people in this community, outside community, all over the state. And it might seem like it's an American problem, but I could tell you the judges in Middlesex County and Mercer County especially, they know it's an us problem. So anybody who believes that this isn't occurring in our community is blind to what's really going on. Okay. So because we're short on time, I want to talk about what happens here in New Jersey. So everything in the United States, we're very litigious. Everything is governed by a set of laws. New Jersey is no different. But what's good about New Jersey is that for men, women, and children who are subject to the cycle of domestic violence, New Jersey has the strongest laws on the books for domestic violence victims. And what Sister Rahila mentioned about the hotline is also covered in the handbook that you have that I passed out. The Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, known as the PDVA of 1991, governs domestic violence in New Jersey. And you could see the politicians, the legislative intent is to provide the maximum protection from abuse the law could provide and to ensure full access to the protections of the legal system. Other state politicians, when they look at their own domestic violence laws to change, they look at the PDVA right here because we have the best rights and remedies in the country. And the reason we do is because we've seen so many terrible examples of people that were arrested for hurting their spouse, get out of jail, and the next day murder them. It has happened, and unfortunately it continues to happen. Okay. So oftentimes when I get people from our community, whether it's Muslim, whether it's a cultural community, or even, a non-Muslim community, these are the general ingredients that lead to domestic violence, okay? It's self-explanatory, but you could see it's a whole host of ingredients and recipe that lands somebody in this type of system. Mental health issues. We know that during the pandemic, it's no joke, and our community is not immune to it, that during this 2 or 3 year period, people got laid off. They were on each other 24 hours a day. That created a lot of anxiety, depression, and these issues, stuff that I'm sure Rahila deals with on a daily basis. They were abused themselves or witnessed it themselves. Anger issues, stress, alcohol, gambling, lack of spirituality, lack of familiar structure, so on and so forth. All these things are a recipe for disaster. Why is that important? Because I'm going to give you an example to tie all this in how it works in New Jersey, right? So let's say we have a husband and wife that is from Pakistan that had been married for 30 years, okay? And the husband and the wife come here to work, but neither one of them are U.S. citizens. They have 2 kids, and during the pandemic, the husband ends up losing his job. Stress comes out in the family, and you see a lot of animosity starting to develop between the husband and wife for no reason other than the stress and the pain of losing their job. This is a time when your spirituality is questioned, it's contested, it slowly starts chipping away at the enamel between dunya and your religion, right? So in this particular example, this is based on a true case, but I'm flipping it up for privacy reasons. And what happens is that the husband and wife get into an argument about a financial situation. Husband, in his lack of restraint, gets mad, ends up, slapping the wife, okay? Now, I've had cases where the woman is the aggressor. I'm just using man in this example because I'd say about 90% of my clients in this area happen to be women, but in the victim sense. Slaps the wife, she falls back, hits her head because it was that strong of a slap. She starts bleeding. The kids happen to see what happened at this point, right? Wife gets up, calls 911, right? Knee-jerk reaction, I'm hurt, I'm mad, I'm done with this. Calls 911. Then she realized what she's done. She's like, okay, this might be a problem now because maybe my husband will get arrested. Police come immediately, and I think we're in East Windsor, so let's just use East Windsor Police Department. The local municipal police department responds. They go to the door. The wife is crying in a corner. The husband's mad in his room. The kids end up opening the door. They walk in. The police have their body-worn cameras, BWC, on their chest, and it captures what's happening. They go in, and they see a slap mark. It's still red, and because she fell back from the slap being so hard, she's bleeding a little bit. So under New Jersey state protocol, the police mandatorily have to arrest the husband, who's listed as the aggressor. Okay? Now, why this is important is because we know many people in our community are not U.S. citizens. In the example I just gave, he's not a U.S. citizen. So how does this play out? It's like a game of chess. Now, in this particular scenario, he's been arrested for domestic violence, simple assault. So now he has a criminal charge. He's not a United States citizen, so his immigration now is in jeopardy. After he's taken away, the rest of the patrolmen asked the wife, "Miss, would you like to come down to the police department to apply for a restraining order?" She goes, "Yes, I'd like to, because there have been other incidents that our kids have not seen, and I just can't deal with this anymore. I've had it. I have to stick up for myself. I understand we have imams that we can go to, similar to what the Jewish community does. So, for example, I live on the border of Toms River in Lakewood. The Jewish people there have something called the Beis Din, where they try to keep everything in-house with their rabbinical judges. But oftentimes when there's a problem, they go to the secular courts. We do it more often than they do, but very kind of similar. So what happens is that they go down to the East Windsor Police Department. They have somebody there for the kids. They wake up the judge at 2 in the morning, and they say, "I have Mrs. So-and-so here. She wants to apply for a restraining order." Okay? The judge puts her under oath, asks her questions, and then asks about any past history of domestic violence between them. She lays it all out, and then the judge grants what's known as a TRO, temporary restraining order. I'm going to show you a copy of what a real one looks like just so you get an idea. Okay, it was up here a second ago. All right, I'll get back to it. All right, so in any event, what happens is that the individual now who got arrested is facing not only immigration issues, not only a criminal issue, but he's now also facing a restraining order issue. The way it works in New Jersey is that a restraining order is considered civil, but it's also kind of criminal because you use the criminal code, and it's heard before a family law judge. So that makes it confusing, even confusing for lawyers who don't practice in this area, because you have a mix of everything. So now that individual, again, criminal case, immigration case, restraining order case. Oh, but wait, because the children were present when the assault happened, the Division of Child Permanency and Placement, which used to be called DYFS, Division of Youth and Family Services, has to be mandatorily called to make sure that there's no abuse or neglect in the home. So now there's 4 cases pending, just in this one loss of cool. So if you saw our flyer, and as the imam talked about, controlling your tongue, controlling your hand, this one action as a result of this fight has caused a ripple effect of 4 different things. Because it's a domestic violence case, even though, I mean, of course, the wife was assaulted, it's major to everybody, but it's not a murder or anything like that. The husband, by law, gets arrested, gets put on a warrant, gets taken down to the jail. He gets taken down to the county jail for at least 2 days before he sees a judge and before he's released. So even on a relatively small thing, back on January 1st, 2017, the politicians increased the hold time for a person when they get arrested to go and wait in the jail. The husband gets released at this point, and because he's not a United States citizen, and I mentioned that the couple was Pakistani, just because I'm half Pakistani, half Indian, and I'm using that. So in that scenario, what happens is that the husband now has to get a hotel, or he has to go to a friend's place to stay, because he's completely barred by the restraining order from going back to his own home. And he's barred from seeing his kids on that restraining order for the time being. What happens now, he calls his mother in Pakistan and says, listen, Mom, I need you to do something. The wife, this is what happened. I want you to call her, please, because I can't call her, even though the restraining order clearly says you can't have third parties call. And what happens is that he gets out of jail 2 days later. The mother from Pakistan, of course, jumps up, knee-jerk reaction, is angry. What? My son has been kicked out of the home. He can't see his kids. She calls the wife, starts cursing around, Urdu and Punjabi, saying, my son told me to call you. You better drop this. Wife, of course, what does she do? Because the police told her. She calls the police. The husband gets found at the hotel, gets rearrested. Now it's his 5th case for contempt of a restraining order. Okay? So you could see, in addition to his legal problems, his legal bills are going to be adding up too, but he's facing serious consequences at this point. He gets rearrested, and now he's facing a contempt charge with the Mercer County Prosecutor's Office in the family part with those set of attorneys dealing with him. All right? So you have that issue. Oh, and what happened is that he happened to be a hunter. He had no prior record. For whatever reason, he liked to go hunting, so he had a shotgun, which he legally acquired. And he wanted home defense. He wanted a handgun because he didn't live in such a great area. So that restraining order serves as a warrant to go seek into the home and take away any weapons, because common sense, the judge doesn't want anybody accused of domestic violence from having quick access when they're mad to weapons. So now the police from East Windsor go, during the time they went and arrested him, so I should have went back, but during the time they arrested him, end up seizing the shotgun and the handgun. That's his 6th case. That's a forfeiture now with the prosecutor's office. These are all different units and all separate cases that this individual has to deal with. But it keeps getting worse in this scenario, because the wife, she hasn't been working ever since she's been in the United States. She doesn't speak English so well. Remember, I told you at the beginning, the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act in 1991 is extremely pro-victim, very bad against the defendant. There are multiple organizations throughout the state, Muslim and non-Muslim. So for example, we have Wafa House up north, Wafa organization. We have Manavi that does South Asian women's assistant in New Brunswick. And the interesting thing is that even though if a woman can't afford, or any plaintiff, I shouldn't say woman, any victim can't afford the full legal price of an attorney, if she has enough to borrow and pay the attorney, if she goes to trial, the law allows the judge to order the abuser to pay for all of her attorney's fees, which is one positive thing for women or any victim, because now the judge can say, you're paying her fees for abusing her or him, whatever the scenario may be, okay? So, like I told you, it's considered a civil case. It's a civil matter. It's heard in the family part using criminal rules. There's no jury. Like if anybody watches Law & Order and they have the quick jury murder trials done in like 10 minutes, there's no jury. Only a judge decides what happens here. And there's no right to an attorney. So if you're in a criminal case and you can't afford an attorney, the public defender can be hired for you or be assigned to you if you make under a certain amount. But if you're a defendant and you can't afford it, you might have to fight this restraining order in court by yourself, okay? I could tell you that during the last couple of years, I probably ended up doing more trials than any attorney that I know of on Zoom and in person for domestic violence, probably about in excess of 60 in the last couple of years. Hello? Okay, I think this went dead. So, so the reason that's really important is because in New Jersey, if you're going to remember one thing from what I'm saying, we just like doctors. This isn't working. Just like.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة
Okay. I was told that we're going to break at 8 p.m. for prayer, so let me keep this moving a little bit. So in my example, what I was saying is that, for example, if we have physicians in here, there's cardiologists, psychiatrists, physiatrists, endocrinologists. Same thing with attorneys. We have corporate lawyers, immigration, criminal, civil, personal injury. What I want everybody to remember is, in New Jersey, no case goes faster in the entire state court system than a domestic violence case. Nothing. Not bankruptcy, not criminal, not civil, you name it, nothing goes faster. By court rule, it has to be heard, a final restraining order has to be heard within 10 days. Now, there's a couple of exceptions. Somebody might be sick, somebody might want to get a lawyer, but still, by far, this is the quickest docket ever, a restraining order. Now, to speed this up a little bit, in order for a person to succeed for a restraining order, there's three things that have to be proven. Three things. It's known as the rule of three. People tend to memorize things in three, and this is in three. So the first thing is, in the example that we used with the woman who was slapped and she fell backwards and hit her head, the first thing she has to prove under the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act is that she is a victim of domestic violence. Well, duh, that kind of makes sense. But what does that mean legally? It means that she had to have either been married or engaged to the offender. She either has a child with him or is expecting a child with him. She was in a dating relationship with him, right? And that's obviously, we're in the United States, there's a lot of dating, so that qualifies. Or they're household members, meaning they lived under the same roof. So we know that first part, when she testifies in court in front of the judge, with a lawyer or without a lawyer, that part is easily going to be proven because she was married to him. And she has children with him too. And they've lived under the same roof in East Windsor, and she's over the age of 18. So all that's going to be met. That's the easy part. The hard part is the next two parts. So, and I don't know what happened to my slide with the actual restraining order, but we'll get back to that. What happens is that she's got to talk about, in front of the judge, the second part. The second part she has to prove is that an act or various acts of domestic violence took place on the night in which her husband got charged. Now, many times, women don't call or men don't call the police. They decide days later. Like Rahila was saying before, you get a safe space, you have an emergency plan. Some people wait till they can exit out safely. They have words and code words. I've seen women who have code words with their friends through text to kind of let them know that, uh-oh, I'm in a troubled situation, please help me out, without letting the offender realize what's going on. As almost childlike when we were kids, we talk in codes or something like that. Adults use it for their own safety, for their children's safety in these type of situations. She has to prove one of 19 things happened on that night. A criminal restraint, harassment, kidnapping, terroristic threats, simple assault, and in our case, simple assault would be met. So there's 19 different boxes that get checked off. She would have to convince the judge that she was assaulted by her husband on that night. What proof would she have? Well, normally they're not going to let kids testify in that type of hearing because they're too young. So there's a question of whether or not they're competent to testify. And plus, no parent's going to want their child to testify to something that traumatic. But the police officer could come in and say, we got a 911 call, play the 911 call. You could hear her in live time screaming for help. So that's very powerful evidence. Number two, she's got a picture of her red face and the blood that the police took, so she could use that as evidence. She could have the doctor who treated her after she got the restraining order and she went down to the hospital testify, or urgent care, or the ambulance, paramedics, whatever the case may be. So she has to prove that. So let's say she proved that. The third part, she has to prove that a final restraining order should issue against her husband to protect her from further abuse or immediate danger. And what the judge uses to look at that is the history between the parties. So let's say in her example, they've been married for 15 years. The wife can itemize, or any victim, husband too, can itemize any past instances of domestic violence. I've had cases that go back 40 years, they've been married, and the list is like 5 pages long, okay? So if the judge finds that, all three, the judge can issue a final restraining order at the end of the trial. One of the main things the judge looks at is who is more believable. Is the victim more believable or the defendant? The reason that this is very strong for victims is because if anybody watches ID Channel, Law and Order, or anything like that, or anybody who's in civics class in high school knows that in a criminal case, it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, which is very high. Anybody who's following that case with the attorney in South Carolina who just got convicted of murder, everybody has to agree it's beyond a reasonable doubt. But for these type of cases, it's a preponderance of the evidence. And what that realistically means is that if you take a look at the clock that's on the north side of this wall, so that clock over there is almost at 8 p.m. Imagine the clock being listed at 9:15 p.m. So the arms are exactly even. If the wife in that situation puts enough evidence for that 9:15 to go to 9:16, she wins the case. It's that minute in this type of case. So it's very good for a victim, very bad for a defendant. So let's say at the end of the case, and again, I'm skipping through a lot because we started late and there's a time constraint, and it's Isha, but I'll talk to anybody afterwards. Everybody has my card there. My personal number's on the card too, but this is a topic that could take all week. So what happens is that the judge finds the wife more believable, finds that there's enough evidence, grants the final restraining order. What does that mean for the defendant husband? Well, we know already the 6 cases that are pending against him. Final restraining orders in New Jersey are different than most other states because they are permanent. Like New York, for example, you have to go back a couple times to re-up it. New Jersey, they're permanent. They last forever with very minor exceptions that we don't need to get into here, but they are permanent. The judge says, I'm granting you temporary exclusive possession of the home, even though the husband's on the deed and he's paying the mortgage. I'm granting you temporary exclusive possession of the kids, okay? I'm ordering the husband in the interim to pay child support and spousal support. His guns are seized and forfeited, okay? He has to pay mandatorily a fine of $50 to $500. He will get fingerprinted by the Sheriff's Department in Mercer County. His name will go in the Domestic Violence Abuse Registry. And let's say they shared a cat together. They bought the cat together, right? The non-abusive party gets possession of the cat, all right? He gets ordered to do domestic violence batterer's course for 52 weeks and pay for it himself. The list goes on and on and on. What happens is that in this particular case, the husband is then also ordered to pay $8,000 to the wife's attorney who came with an attorney. So the wife gets the money back. Let's say she borrowed $8,000. She gets that back too. So you could see And actually, excuse me, the most important thing, if the husband now tries to go back and do anything to violate that final restraining order, she has to just call the police. All law enforcement, nationally, federally, state, local, know that that's in effect. And he will get arrested, and he will be charged with either it's not called a misdemeanor in New Jersey, but so you understand, a misdemeanor or a felony contempt of a restraining order, which he will get prosecuted on each time. And I could tell you, in this era we're living, especially with women, there's crazy stalkers out there. There are people all over social media. There are instances of people who have just completely lost it. So you have to be very careful, and that's why that restraining order is very important. And to add, not to add insult to injury, but the eighth thing, now the wife, or the seventh thing or the eighth thing, the wife goes and hires a divorce lawyer. So we see just in this one simple example of how complicated this particular family situation got. But think about it. Who are really seeing the abuse? The children. And that's what goes back to what the Imam and what Rahila were saying about that cycle. Because people oftentimes imitate what they see. And what do they see the most in their formative years? They see it in their parents. So if that's the situation, life tends to copy them. All right? I just want to halt for a second and defer to the Imam. Imam, I don't know if you want to do Isha or you want me to just ask any questions and wrap it up, because I had to really expedite this in a very short amount of time.
So, I got you. Assalamu alaikum. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go for Isha, then we're gonna come back and we're gonna have everyone put their food, and then we'll do closing remarks and Q&A over dinner. Does that sound okay to you?
Perfect, whatever.
Does it sound okay to you?
It sounds great.
Okay, so that's what we'll do then, inshallah. But thank you all for being with us this beautiful night. Let's break for Isha, and then we'll come right back, inshallah.